All right, Yeti is back with another EMTB. This time, it's a big dog. We've got the LTE.
I'm like, whoa, that thing over here. I got a $50 bill, I'm trying to stick in your rear. She like, whoa, it kinda tickles in there. I'm feeling tipsy off a pill, someone get me a beer. I'm like,
if the Santa Cruz Bullet is the plush couch and the Orbeo Wild is the firm race seat, the LTE sits right in the middle of those two. It doesn't erase the trail, but it doesn't beat you up. Instead, it feels calm, composed, collected, and stout as f***. So stick around to see if it's the right EMTB for you. So here is everything you need to know about the brand spanking new LTE. For travel and geometry, got 160 mils of rear travel, 170 up front, 64 head to angle, proper big bike. This rolls on the Bosch Performance Line CX. It does come with the post firmware update motor, so you get 100 Newton meters of peak torque and 700 watts of power output. This one does come with an 800 watt hour battery, although you can run a 600 if you'd like, but that's on you to find one and get it there. You can't buy it from Yeti with a 600 installed. And one last cool little thing about the drive unit, this is now coming with the screen, the little Bosch screen that's sitting in the top tube. Looks real nice. This uses Sixfinity, just like the MTE and the 160E used. This is their newest version of that. This can also run MX or 29, but again, stock from Yeti, you're only going to get this in the 29 configuration. Now that we did that really quick, let's get to the ride review. So we're going to tackle this the same way we did the Fluid VLT, where I run through the scoreboard and defend all of my scores. I liked that format. Seems like you liked that format, so we're going to stick with it. For the drive unit, we're going to go +2 on this one. If we're being honest, there's not a lot to say here. The Bosch Performance Line CX is still at the top of the category for me. It's basically the industry benchmark, in my opinion. It's tried, it's tested, it's reliable, and especially after that firmware update, it offers a ton of power, a ton of torque. It does so in a very natural, calm, and predictable way. And we're seeing that cool new little screen from Bosch. It's a full color screen. It's bright, it's crisp, and there's a ton of cool data on there if you're into that while you're riding. And there is some battery flexibility in the LTE. Although it only comes stock with an 800, you can run it with the 600, but you're on your own to source one of those and to get it in the bike. Doing some math here really quick on range for you. And the math is done. For range, we've got just a little over 7 feet per watt hour at my weight, which is 195, and that's full boost, obviously, because that's the only way e-bike should go. All in all, you're looking at probably about 5,000 feet per battery. Now, let's get into climbing performance. We're going to go +1 here. Yeti has a way of making their bikes go uphill really well. They have balanced geometry, a good ride position that keeps you between the wheels. And in the past, their bikes have typically had a pretty low front end, kind of low, racy, and sporty, which is very helpful for keeping weight over the front of the bike. And on the climbs, that's going to be very beneficial. The LTE has a little bit taller stack height than most other Yetis, so it does sit up a little bit taller. It's not so tall that now the front end's lifting and wandering. Still very easy to keep your weight centered up between those wheels, but for me, I'm a tall guy and I like a tall front end, just a little bit more upright, a little more relaxed, and over a long day, that's really nice to have. As far as the suspension goes on the climbs, the LTE offers 2 standout features to me. First is the ability to get that rear wheel out of the way when it comes to rough and chunky climbs. You've got ledges, you've got rocks, you've got roots, and that rear wheel gets over them very easily. Benefit of that is obviously it's going to be easier to climb technical stuff, but you can also pedal through that kind of stuff really well. In fact, I was able to pedal through some technical sections that honestly you're kind of lurching your way up. This one, it was pretty anticlimactic. I just rode up it. And second, that Sixfinity suspension platform offers something I haven't really seen much, and that's a lot of anti-squat, but plenty of traction. So it doesn't have that hardtail-esque feel that a lot of high anti-squat bikes can have. Instead, it feels pretty active and pretty grippy, but it also doesn't bog down. And I used to think anti-squat didn't matter all that much on a full power e-bike. You have the motor to overcome all of it, and yeah, that's true. But I can appreciate the fact that you don't sag into the travel as much under your pedaling forces and the motor forces. It maintains the bike's geometry just a little bit better. Now, let's go to descending capability. This was the easiest category for me to score. This is a +2. Stout AF is possibly the best way to describe the LTE. It's pretty damn tough to get this one to bend out of shape. And the best part is it doesn't ride like a school bus in order to achieve that. It just has this really calm and composed demeanor about it. And it has that demeanor across a really wide variety of terrain. And it also has a way of slowing things down and making them seem like they're not coming at you quite as fast. So you can ride faster because the bike makes everything seem slower. This one handles high speeds with just a ton of stability, as well as the slow speed, kind of steep and scary stuff with a lot of confidence. And I do think that taller front end is a contributor here. From a suspension standpoint, this bike bulldozes over stuff without feeling numb. One thing it does really well is it handles small hits and big hits very well on both ends, but without muting or erasing the trail. So you'll monster truck over them or through them, but you'll feel them, which is kind of nice to have that connection to the trail. You know where the bike is, you know what it's doing, but the trail isn't really affecting you or knocking you offline or getting you bent out of shape. And then the geometry on this one, it's long, it's slack, it's burly. So obviously this handles high speeds with just a ton of stability. But the part that's maybe not so apparent is how it does that without feeling cumbersome. And I was also very impressed by the bike's ability to hold a high line or to maintain traction in these nasty off-camber bits. And I would imagine there's a few factors here. A lot of them coming from the geometry, like the long wheelbase, that's going to help there. You've got a good balance front to back because the chainstays are fairly long as well. I think the dual 29-inch setup helps with that. You just get a little bit more tire on the ground, and that's great for traction. But obviously the suspension plays a factor in that too. I would have to take this bike as my top pick for descending capability in this category. Suspension performance, we're going to go +1. The Sixfinity platform is pretty special. I really like the way it can separate pedaling and braking forces from the suspension. And I really like what Yeti's done to give you the ability to fine-tune your suspension. You get progression flip chips, so you can run it in a variety of progression settings. I started in the middle or the neutral one, and then I tried the one on either side of that. I ended up preferring just a little bit more progression on this bike. It helps make the bike just a little softer off the top without compromising that support you need to ride the bike actively and to make it an engaging ride. The ability for the user to tune this is great. As far as the ride quality goes, it's not quite as plush as the Santa Cruz Bullet, but it's certainly not as firm as the Orbea Wild. Kind of sits in the middle. It does a good job of reducing that small trail chatter, but maybe more importantly, it handles those big hits without any fuss. It allows you to just push through G-outs, big compressions, take square-edged hits, and just keep trucking. Handling, we're going to go 0. From a handling perspective, the LTE is fairly average for the category. It's not overly fun and lively. It's not the easiest to get off the ground or to goof off on the trail. It is good in the corners though, and that's probably a little more important than the fun stuff to me. The LTE did surprise me with its mild-mannered handling, given how big this bike is. Usually when you see a bike this big, it kind of rides like a bus, and that is not the case here. Don't take that to mean it's snappy and lively and jibby. It's not that, but it's also not a bus. I find it slots somewhere between the Bullet and Wild again on how engaging it is to ride. It's not quite as lively and jibby as the Bullet, but it's not quite as racy as the Wild. All right, versatility. +2 here. We've got a lot of good things going on here in the versatility department. First, we've got the suspension progression flip chips that we've already talked about, but we've also got the ability to run 29 or MX. And there's a second flip chip to accommodate for both wheel setups. Now getting to the battery, we've got the ability to run an 800 or a 600, giving it versatility points. So basically you have a ton of customization in how you build or set this thing up. And then when it comes to ride quality versatility, this thing is more versatile than I may have thought originally. It obviously handles the tough stuff with ease, but it does really well on the blues, the cruisy stuff, the easy stuff, mostly because it doesn't have that wallowy suspension feel. It doesn't feel overly cumbersome in the handling department, so it does pretty okay on those trails too. Last up, let's do the intangibles. We're going to go 0 here. There's really not a lot to discuss. The paint, the fit, the feel, it all is very nice. It's very premium, and you would expect that from a premium brand. The thing I ended up liking most here was the smart component selection. Not necessarily like the quality or the price tag on those components, but the intended application. They fit this bike very well. Yeti did a good job of aligning the parts on this bike with how this bike is supposed to be ridden. Case in point, The tires. You get gravity casing tires on this bike, which I love to see. E-bikes, especially longer travel e-bikes, should not come with trail casing tires, and Yeti did the right thing here. So what would I change about the LTE? Honestly, there's not a lot to talk about right now. I really like the bike, and I like how it rides. The only thing that I might like to see different is the ability to customize it at the point of purchase. So you don't have to buy the bike and then swap all the parts later. It'd be great if you could get the 800 or the 600 watt hour battery, or if you could get the 29 or the MX wheels when you buy the bike. And I know 11 out of 10 of you are going to want to complain about the price tag. I also hate how stupid expensive bikes are, but I do not discuss price or value of bikes in my reviews. I feel like that's a personal decision between you, your wallet, and your priorities. Instead, I like to lay out how it rides, what's good, what's bad, so you and your wallet can make that decision together. So go ahead, complain about the price. I know this thing's expensive, and yeah, that kind of sucks. Comparisons. Let's get into how this bike stacks up. So we're going to benchmark it against the Bullet and the Wild. Starting with the Bullet. The Bullet is plush and bottomless, and it's got 170 mils of travel front and back, MX wheels, and it's got a traction-heavy focus when it comes to the suspension design. Very active, very plush, very gooey. It does climb fine for a big bike, but it can wander just a little bit. That front end's tall, and it can get away from you from time to time. And another downside is you're locked into a 600 watt-hour battery. You don't have any options here. The LTE trades some of that plushness for composure. With Sixfinity's tunable suspension progression, the wheel size options, bigger battery choices, I just think it's more versatile than the Bullet. And then from a ride quality perspective, I think it is too. All right, and now the LTE versus the Wild. The Wild is very firm and racy. It's got a stiff frame, it's got a long wheelbase, and it just favors stability and speed over anything else. It climbs very well though, which is a pro certainly. On the downhill, the handling could use some love. You get a little bit of that rear end that pushes the front end through the corner, and it can beat you up from time to time. The LTE, I think, beats you up quite a bit less, and it is just slightly more engaging to ride. So I think the LTE wins some points there. The Wild leans like race bike, where the LTE is kind of that all-purpose bike. So who is the LTE for? Let's talk about it. And I think the first category is going to be that EMTB racer. I know I just said the Wild is racier than this, and that's certainly true, but this would be very good at a race for different reasons. So if your idea of fun is chasing seconds and testing yourself against the clock, the LTE has that stability and the composure that you're going to want to need. The Bosch CX motor delivers a ton of power. Sixfinity suspension stays very efficient. You don't have your momentum sapped from you all the time. Riders who are going to want that playful jibby bike are probably going to find this one just a little too grounded. Essentially, this one's built to go fast and tame the trail. Next category, we've got the aggressive descender. For those riders who want steep and rough, and they want a bike that just handles it and doesn't flinch, the LTE definitely delivers. The big geometry gives you confidence on the scary lines. The suspension keeps the bike from getting knocked around too much, but it also doesn't feel vague. So you've got the handling that you need to ride some of that big, gnarly stuff. So if you kind of thrive in that like big mountain terrain, I think the LTE should be on your list. Now, the last up is like the adventurer or the enduro type rider, where you're going to see a lot of different types of terrain. You're going to see high speed, low speed, rough, nasty, smooth, climbs. You're going to see it all, and you need to be prepared for it all. So if your rides are long, they're varied, they're demanding, the LTE's versatility stands out. It can cover ground with tons of confidence, and it just feels ready for anything you're going to throw at it. So I've tested a bunch of big full power EMTBs lately. If you want to go see how those stack up, go watch those videos, but that's going to do it. We'll see you next time.